Begin the current Daf Mesechta Bava Metzia Daf Nun Gimel. We begin on the bottom of Nun Beis and Beis, 5 lines up in the bottom of the Yamid, where the Gemara is in the middle of an interesting conversation over here. The Gemara is going to go back to a teaching from Chizkiah, which will explain in a second, regarding the Chilul of Meiser Sheni, which relates back to the halacha that we were discussing previously in our Mishnah, when we're speaking about the oinos mammon of a matbeya. So the Mishnah ended off regarding that, although that it's going to be disqualified when there's oinah of the matbeya, whether it be a 12, a 24, a 6, for business, but for Meiser Sheni, you could give it, you're not concerned because it's only nefesh ra, and that's what the Gemara is in the middle of discussing with this teaching of Chizkiah regarding how we treat the chilul of Meiser Sheni. Shiv corresponds by Kalzik and Cheskah turned of Daf Chaim, which turns today's Daf, Shbius Chos, V'chem and Yisrael, and Yisrael throughout the entire world. So discussing today's Daf, our Meiser Sheni can only be redeemed with Kesef Tzura, has to have a form to it, like it says, V'tzal to be Odecha, but not with an Asimon, which is an unminted coin. What's Halacha Pichse B'chedei Oinah? If the coin gets diminished, the amount of Oinah. Now Chizkiah explained, Bola Parta B'Shavia. When you're actually coming to exchange your Meiser funds, that was diminished the coin. So you're going to actually do it with its value. But you're going to go ahead and do it b'toiras yafa, which we already mentioned this Gemara on the previous stuff. Exactly what is b'toiras yafa? The Gemara's Havamina versus the Gemara's Maskana. That it actually means its actual value, not what would the Gemara and the Havamina thought that you could go ahead and be mezalzel in Meiser, and that's actually where Gemara continues with that other teaching of Chizkiah, which he said a Meiser Sheni she'imeshav a pruta. If it doesn't have a value of pruta, what do you do? Because you cannot be mechal, as we'll learn in today's daf. Meiser beloy kol Meiser. So he says, okay, who v'chaim shemachol al Meiser Sheni? He says, I was ready to mechal other Meiser Sheni, and there, that's actually the right that Chizkiah holds, that you cannot be mezalzel b'meiser, that you're so careful that you even actually overestimate, and therefore there's room left over for your pachas meshav pruta that you don't know what to do with it, and you'll be mechal on the Meiser Sheni. Allah bittul b'rayv, that generally things are nullified in the majority. However, davar she'en la matirin, meaning davar sheyesh la matirin, actually, it should say that something that has a permitter, afil of elef lebatel, that even in 1,000 it's not going to be nullified. That's it's a rabbinic halacha, because if you could have it in the permitted way, it's davar sheyesh la matirin. Why would we go ahead and say not nullify? And why would we do a bittul, which is a b'diavad concept, when you could have it in the permitted way? The Gemara brings a Mishnah Bikurim that discusses the contrast of Trum Bikurim versus that of Meiser. That Trum Bikurim, their nullification is only, however, unique as 100 to 1, and it's not valid just with a majority. Some of the other terms, the concept today's daf of kaltul machitzis, that once you bring the Meiser Sheni into Yerushalayim, the walls have already taken possession of it, which is the final destination. Now you can't go ahead and be paid it anymore. That certain things the Torah talks about when you're going to redeem it, you have to add on the fifth. And the question is, however, regarding one of the items, if what the halacha is on that fifth itself. So we begin the current daf nun beis and beis, 5 lines up on the bottom of the Yamid. The Mishnah had said, how much is considered oinah for a coin? So the Mishnah had said that if the coin was diminished to the point that there would be an isser of oinah, the owner may not trade the coin for its face value, but rather only for its current value. That was our previous Mishnah. Now the Mishnah ended up by saying, the coin can be used to redeem Meiser Sheni at its current value. As Rashi explained, the chiddush of the Mishnah was, we don't say that it's like a nasimon, that because Meiser Sheni can only be redeemed with kesef tzura, when minted coin is a valid currency, like it's in the pasuk b'tzar to be a but not with an unminted coin. Now we might think that since this coin is pichs b'chdei no and not accepted by all, it's not considered a valid currency. That's the chiddush of the Mishnah. Now, however, the Mishnah is telling us only at its current value, as Chizkiah taught. So there's a few different teachings of Chizkiah. We're jumping back in over here. That he said, "Bola parta b'shavia, bola chal machal b'tez yafa." When he changes the Meiser Sheni money into smaller coinage in Yerushalayim in order to purchase food, he's only going to receive it at its current value. So too, when he redeems it, he can only redeem it according to its current value, because as the Gemara, this is the last thing that we said. The last words we said were we don't apply two leniencies to Ma'aser Sheni. First of all, to redeem with a coin that is Pirsa, that's a Zilzal, because you're using, even though for Mekach and Memcha, we don't let you use such a coin, for Ma'aser Sheni, we said we're going to let you. And then to redeem the coin to the coin's full face value, no, you can't do both of them. So we're only going to let you, when we say B'teiras Yafa, meant, as Rashi explained on the first of the white lines, that Meshachila Kifi Damim V'Adayim Shalah, meaning according to its definitive value, that's what you're limited to. Now, one of the teachings that we mentioned in the previous this Gemara's discussion was another one of Chizkiya's teachings, which is what the Gemara is going to explain right now. 5 lines up at the bottom of Yamid. So Gufa, and this was part of the Gemara's discussion, where the Gemara had said that to qualify Chizkiya's teaching, we thought it meant one thing. We explained no, it can't mean that we're mezalzel in our treatment of the Ma'aser Sheni, like to be mitzamtzim and or even to like extend it, like to shortchange Ma'aser. No, because we see from this teaching of Chizkiya that we're actually very stringent, and we extend our chil as Gufa Amar Chizkiya. Chizkiya is like this: Ma'aser Sheni Shem B'Shav Pruta. What do you do if you have a Ma'aser Sheni? It's not like you have one cucumber. It's not even worth a pruta. Now, as we'll see later on the daf, you cannot be mechal it on the full pruta. It's not chashuv enough to be toifis a pidyon. So what do you do? But l'maisa, you don't want to take that cucumber up to Yerushalayim. You're traveling from all the way where you live up north. So Aymar, he says like this: Hu v'chumshay, because when you redeem Ma'aser Sheni, you have to add on the fifth too. It and its fifth mechul al Ma'aser Sheni. He already had his whole truckload full of money, had a whole suitcase full of money of Ma'aser Sheni money that he redeemed. He says, let it be deconsecrated on those earlier monies. What does that mean? What do you mean? I already used that money to deconsecrate my whole plantation. No, it's not possible for a person to be exacting with his money. That for sure he had overdone it, that he had given more money than what the Ma'aser Sheni is. And that was actually the proof we brought from the previous daf to explain that it can't be that when we're saying that when you be Mechal Ma'aser Sheni, you're going to do it in an irreverent way, and that you're going to undercut Ma'aser Sheni. No, we see to the contrary, that a person actually overdoes it, and therefore there must be extra room for your pachas mishav pruta to go be mechal on that money. Okay, that's the teaching. That gets us just back into the headspace of that teaching, because now the Gemara is going to discuss that teaching as classic Talmudic style. It wasn't the main part of our discussion, but it came in. Now we're discussing it. Basically, the Gemara asks on this from the Mishnah Masechet Bikurim. Mishnah says, and again, this is an unrelated Mishnah, but we're going to extract something from it. Hatruma v'Bikurim. Now, Bikurim, which is the first fruits of this Shivas Aminim that a person has, is compared in the Torah to Truma, because the Torah calls it Truma. As the Gemara says, Malchus of Yadayin says, Trumas Yodecha. What's Trumas Yodecha? That refers to Bikurim. Okay, so Truma Bikurim, they have similar halachas that they have in the following areas. Misa, if a zar, meaning a non-kohen or a kohen that's tummy, deliberately eats truma, he's chayiv misa. Number 2, b'choimish, if a non-kohen eats it by mistake, the pasuk says he's going to have to add on the 5th of when he pays back for the truma that he ate, and this applies to both truma and bikurim. And we continue on top of Nun Gimel with Aleph. It's forbidden for a non-kohen to eat the truma bikurim, which obviously that's pretty obvious if you're going to be chayiv misa. So Rashi explains, no, we have to say it because we wanted to say the flip side. That meiser, not only is it not a chayiv misa, it's not even the isser for a non-kohen to eat meiser. And v'henichli kohen, these truma bikurim is the assets of a kohen that he owns it. He could use it to be mekadesh a woman, which is not the case by meiser. Because the Stam Mishnah Mikum is like Rameir, who he says that Meiser's Mama Gavaya, it's considered Hashem's money, and you actually cannot be Mekadesh Isha with the Meiser. But Truma Mikum you could. And V'oilam Be'echad Ameya. And this is the important halach over here, which we're contrasting with Meiser, that you need 101 to nullify the mice with the Truma or Bikurim that got mixed into chulin to be mevatlet, meaning we don't do a regular bittul b'roiv, a simple majority of 51 to 49. We don't do that, which is not the case by meiser. that there is a bittul b'rayv, and you don't need to have 101 to 1. Moreover, continues the Mishnah, that you have to wash your hands when you're eating the peiros of truma or bikurim, because what happens is we assume a person's hands are, as the Rabbanim Geyser, as a secondary level of tuma. Now, since your hands are a sheni would make a shlishi by truma, which is not the case by meiser, because meiser cannot become a shlishi. So there's no point of washing your hands, which actually that's the famous shmuz by Karpas, but where you don't have to wash your hands for peiros, which actually the Gemara says whoever washes his hands for peiros is migasir ruach. He's considered arrogant, as the Gemara says a chagiga daf yitchesem abeis. So therefore, I mean that's regular peiros when the person's coming to eat. Now says the Mishnah further, v'herav shemesh, that is for tuma da'iraisa, a person has to wait when he becomes tahar for truma and bikurim for sunset, which is not the case by ma'aser, as the Gemara says in the Yavamis Tavayin Dama Beis, that you could toivel, come out of the mikveh, and you could eat ma'aser right away, as the Gemara learns out from Sukkim. So unlike truma bikurim, which requires sunset. Now says the Mishnah, by truma bikurim. These are all by truma bikurim. Everything I just said, says the Mishnah, for truma bikurim does not apply to ma'aser. Okay, now we want to pick out one of these halachas which are relevant for our question that we're asking on Chizkiah. My masha enke b'maiser. What does it mean, which is not the case by maiser? Lav machlal, isn't it inferred? Because the maiser, what would the maiser halacha by maiser be? Like it normally is, which is batal beruba. That is going to be nullified in a majority. Which, as Rashi explains, obviously that we're talking about b'maiser that has no way of remedying it, meaning you cannot redeem it, you cannot bring it up to Yerushalayim. Why? Because if there was a way to remedy it, then the Rabbanan say, davar sheyesh le matirin, something that has a way of permitting it, there is no bittul. So it can't. If you're talking about bittul, by default that must mean that there is no takana. So what's the case? It must be the one where it became tummy. You can't eat it because you can't eat the maestris that became tummy, and it must be that it's not worth a pruta, so that you can't redeem it. Because if it was, then you would be able to redeem it. So you can't eat it, and you can't go ahead and redeem it. So that must be the case, and that's what we're saying, that unlike Truma B'kum, which requires 101 to 1, Meiser would only have the classic halacha bit b'rayv. Says the Gemara, now this is the punchline. The Nisa de Chizkiah, now if you held of Chizkiah's halacha, that even if you have something less than the Shabbat Pruta, that's okay. Oh, because of your previously redeemed things, which you do it with a margin that you're leaving over, and you can be mechalel on that. So havale davashiesh lamatirin. That means to say that this pachas b'shabbat pruta meiser has a permitted way because you can redeem it. So then, wait a second. We're back to the question. Anything that has permitted ways, I feel bad for bottles, not enough even 1,000. So how you tell me that the meiser is going to be bottle b'rayv? Says the Gemara. Oh, okay. So right. So the Gemara is going to say that. The Gemara is going to come to that. Shaila is why the Gemara is assuming that you would have. But says the Gemara, Imamai, from where do you know? First, the Gemara asks a more fundamental question. From where do you know the Masha Inkim Maisa? You're telling me that Truma Bikurim has halacha bittul requires 101 to 1. You tell me, which is not the case by Maisa. That what? What's halacha by Maisa? The batal beru, but it is nullified majority. How do you know? The batal call. Maybe to the contrary. Maybe you're right. Maybe there's no bittul at all. Why is no bittul? Because of Chizki's halacha. Because you could always be matered by doing a pidyon. So to the contrary, it's not only not a question, but almost sound like it's like Chizki. So well, no. Let me tell you something. You cannot say what you're trying to say, because the Gabi Truma, regarding the case of Truma and Bikurim, Chumrei de Truma Katani. This Mishnah, it was taught in Masechta Bikurim. It's telling us the significance of Truma and Bikurim. Kuli de Truma Lekatani. I'm not telling the leniencies of Truma, that it should be nullified, albeit with 101. Then a Meiser is never nullified. There would be a Chumrah of Meiser. We're not telling you Chumrah, we're telling Chumrah of Truma and Bikurim. So it wouldn't make sense to say that Masha'egim Meiser means that Meiser is not going to have bittul at all. Says Gemara, really? You tell me you only say the Chumras of Bikurim? But Vakatani, one of the cases was Ve'nichse Kayin. You told me that Truma Bikurim belongs to the Kayin. He gives him a Kaddish Isha. That's a kula of Truma Bikurim. Ma'isa is the chumrah, that you can't use the Ma'isa to Mekadosh Isha. The Gemara says, you're right, okay, you got me. It's not necessarily only the chumras, but you cannot entertain to say that by Ma'isa is not going to be bottle at all. It must be that it means when it says Masha'inka Ma'isa, because Ma'isa is not 101 to 1, it's going to be just a simple majority. Why? Because Tanya Behad, Bryce explicitly says, Bryce says, Ma'isa Sheni, bottle Baruba. The second type is nullified in the majority. Now, wait a second. Says the Brisa, when do I ever have a halacha of bittul and Ma'aser Sheni, but it's a davar shish l'matirin, because you could redeem it. Says the Brisa, I'll tell you which Ma'aser Sheni we're talking about. But Ma'aser Sheni b'shava pruta, that's one case, which is like we said, because you can't redeem Ma'aser Sheni less than the pruta, so you're stuck. So then, if it gets mixed in with a tareivus with a mixture, then it's gonna have bittul. Another case, which we're going to go discuss that, this is like we say classic Talmudic style, we're jumping from one palm front to another one, that we're going to get onto that. But the second case is, if the Ma'aser Sheni was already brought into Yerushalayim, then it went out, which the Gemara is going to explain that there's no way of remedying that. You can't eat it and you can't deconsecrate it. That would be another case that now it's a Dvar Isser, and if it gets mixed into a mixture, it would be a Tareivus, and it would apply the halach of Bittul, which is Barayv. So we know clearly from the Brisa that not what you're trying to tell me that there's no bittul at all for Ma'aser. There is a bittul Barayv. Now we're back to the question. The Misa the Chizkiah. Now, if it's true according to Chizkiah's halacha, why is there bittul? Why don't you activate what Chizkiah said? And deconsecrate on the earlier funds. There's no bittul. It's a davar shish l'matirin. You have a way of permitting it. Says the Gemara, D'loi parik. Like we heard before. He never redeemed Ma'aser until now. To have Ma'aser to add on to that. Very simple answer, like we heard before. Says the Gemara, not so simple. I could tell you, V'neisi Ma'aser de Isle. Bring Ma'aser that's worth a half a pruta, v'nitztarafinu, and combine it to this one that's mixed in to the mixture, right? Because we're talking about tarayvers over here, we're talking about bittul. We're saying, what bittul? Davishish matirin. You could permit it. How? Bring another half a pruta worth of Ma'aser, and bring it next to this mixture, and deconsecrate the two halves of a pruta, the one that already got mixed into the other chulin, and this new half a pruta worth of Ma'aser, and you could do chilin, and it has matirin. So what are you telling me? It has halacha of bittul. So if you hold of Chizkiah's teaching, says the Gemara, no, deraisa v'derabbanan lo mitztarfi. You can't combine biblical and rabbinic Ma'aser Sheni. That the pruta that you're bringing should be taifis the kedusha's Ma'aser. What does that mean? So Rashi explains the Masechta Deraisa. This tarayvus, this mixture, minat Torah, really, that Ma'aser is batal b'rayv. Because we know a pasuk in Shemais that says acharam lahatas. We go after the majority. The Rabbanan are the ones who rabbinically come along and they say in the Masechta Beya that where it has matirin, if it could be permitted, not going to say bittul. So therefore, that comes out that this isser of Ma'aser that's in the tarayvus in the mixture is only rabbinic. Oh, you cannot combine that with this other half to redeem it onto that pruta, because it comes out the new half of pruta that you brought is really biblically being eaten without chil, because really the other first half of pruta is really biblically already batal, and it doesn't exist anymore. But Chizkiah's case, Rashi says, is that the earlier monies already took effect. So therefore, that's what we're saying, that there's nothing else that you'll have a problem with. But the case you're trying to describe is not a question on Chizkiah, because it's going to be biblical and rabbinic, and that's not an option. So yes, you still don't have an option, and we're going to have to say bittul. Says he, no, wait, not so fast. V'neisi, why don't you bring a half a pruta's worth of Ma'aser Sheni of demai? What's demai? Demai is the word domai. What is this? When you buy from an Amaretz, so the Isser and the Pidyon is rabbinic. Because biblically, every person is trusted on Ma'aserus. So Gavaldig, bring a half a pruta worth of demai, which is rabbinic, and your tarayvus is also rabbinic, because we said that really midaraisa is batal b'rayv, it's only rabbinically because it's davar shish l'matirin. It's not going to be about, and Gavaldig, and do Chizkiah. Oh, you see, not like Chizkiah, because according to Chizkiah, it shouldn't be bittul, because there is matirin. Says the Gemara, no, you're right, but dilma asal asu yavade. We're concerned that you might bring not demai, but definite tevel, and then it's going to come out that the half a pruta worth that's not mixed in is going to be eaten without chil on the biblical level. See, right? Really, that should be an option. But if you're talking about in rabbinic halacha anyway, the rabbanon are concerned that we're going to let you do this, you might do that. So that's not an option. So therefore, you're back to bittul again, even according to Chizkiah. Says, wait, not so fast. When they see shtei prutas, bring 2 copper coins. So deconsecrate the meiser on a pruta and a half, meaning take that much worth of meiser and deconsecrate it on a pruta and a half of those 2 prutas, and then in the chal high, then go and deconsecrate this mixture, which again has less than the pruta's worth of meiser mixed in, al heich on the other half of pruta that's yisera, that's extra, which should be just like Chizkiah. Why isn't that an option when you're bringing these 2 prutas where you have left? Oh, isn't this the same thing that? In other words, there's no more concern about the whole thing you told me before. No, you can't bring something else because then you might bring badai. No. If I do 2 prutas and I take a pruta and a half worth of meiser sheni and I deconsecrate it, that's already done. Now I have a half a pruta worth that's left over. That's exactly, in other words, basically the Gemara is trying to say I could create what Chizkiah's case was, which someone had already done before. And Chizkiah says, okay, look, you for sure did it in like with margin. So you'll have a way to put your pachas mishava pruta to be mechal on that. I could recreate it. You answered and told me, no, the guy never did before. Okay, you could recreate that. Go take 2 prutas, bring a pruta and a half of meiser shein, and be mechal. What's the problem? That'll be just like Chizkiah's case. So that's the question on Chizkiah. If that's that, then you have matirin. Then how are you allowed to go ahead and do bittul? Says the Gemara, no, mi saber, do you think pruta umechza, a pruta and a half of meiser is going to be tafsish de prutas, is going to capture 2 prutas of sanctity, that then you could say, that then you could combine together with that other half of pruta which already was captured in this kedusha? No, he says the Gemara, it's not going to happen. What does that mean? The way you described it, that the pruta and a half will take effect on those 2 prutas, is not true. Pruta tafsa pruta. You know what's going to happen? 1 pruta is going to take effect of the transfer of the 1 pruta worth of meiser. The chatzi pruta. Now the remaining half of pruta worth of meiser that you have, loy tafsa. It's not going to take effect for the 2nd pruta. And if you're going to say, why? What's the problem? Let the what's mixed in and then that mixture combine to complete this other half of pruta worth of meiser. It's not true, because hadar havali deraisa b'derabbanan. That's taking you back to be biblical and rabbinic. B'deraisa b'derabbanan lemit starfi, and biblical, which is that other half of pruta, and the rabbinic, which is the mixture, they cannot combine. Now, if you're going to say that, wait a second, the Chizkiah also, how do you have margin by Chizkiah? How is it taking effect? You could have that when someone's machal has meiser on a full sela, or in a shekel, or in an isser, a type of a coin, where even if the meiser was only worth 3 prutas, but the whole isser takes effect. But here, when it's a different coin, so then you're not going to have. So the Gemara asks, okay, shkoyach, so not 2 prutas. V'naisi isser, says the one. So bring a whole isser. Be machal on that meiser that's worth less than its amount. You could recreate Chizkiah's case. Says Gemara, no, but dilma osila suya prutas. We're concerned that you might bring 2 prutas. You might try to do it that way, and you're going to bring a meiser of a pruta and a half. Comes out that a half a pruta's worth is going to be eaten without chil. So therefore, it's better for the person to just go ahead and do bittul b'roi. So it's not a difficulty ultimately at the end of the Gemara's discussion on Chizkiah. But now the Gemara, again parenthetical, once we mentioned in the Brisa that we brought in to prove a point in our Gemara's discussion that we're talking about what we thought maybe Mash'enkim Meiser meant, maybe Meiser has no bittul at all, and don't tell me that's a bittul b'roi, which is the question we have in Chizkiah. We showed you no, because there's a Brisa that says clearly that Meiser is bittul b'roi. And which type of Meiser Sheni is the bittul? How could it be bittul if it's double shish matirin? We had 2 cases. First one we were discussing was Meiser that does not have a shava pruta, and then there was a second case. That second case is what we're going to discuss right now. The second case was v'shenichnas l'Yerushalayim v'yatza, If the Ma'aser Sheni had gone into Yerushalayim and then it was taken out, you cannot redeem it anymore. It has no matirin, and therefore, if it gets mixed into a mixture, the halacha bittul will apply. That was the other case. It says, well, wait, b'amai, v'lahat v'layli. What do you mean? Bring it right back in with the taroivis, and then you can eat in Yerushalayim. So it's yesh lematirin. So bittul shouldn't apply. There's a way of permitted eating of it. So how are you going to say that you're nullifying it because it went out? Says the Gemara, we're talking about b'shenitma. We're talking about where the Ma'aser Sheni became tamei, so you can't eat it. So it's not going to help to bring it back in. So therefore the halacha bittul will apply. Says Gemara, but v'nifrake, why don't you redeem it? Because the Gemara assumes that we're talking about that it has a value of a pruta. If it has a value of a pruta, so the Gemara says, Dalmer B'lah. So he says, Menayim Ma'aser Sheni Shenitma. How do you know Ma'aser Sheni became tamei? Shapayin as you redeem it as you continue to beis. Afilu b'Yerushalayim. Even Yerushalayim, where generally Ma'aser that's tar cannot be redeemed in Yerushalayim because it says in the Bava Metzia Daf, it's only when you're far away. So then when it's out of a kesef. But if in Yerushalayim you cannot go ahead and redeem it. But if it became tamei, how do you know that then you can redeem it even Yerushalayim itself? No, that's because now it's not going to be problematic. Now the money is going to take the kedusha status, and now this tumah thing is like chulin that's tamei, so it's not a problem. So you could. I mean, since you could, so then why you tell me bittul works? Because it's a dvar isser. A dvar isser you imavatla. It's not dvar isser. There's yesh lematirin. How's the matirin? Redeem it. If you redeem it, now it doesn't have the sanctity anymore, and there's no halacha bittul that shall apply. Because as we're proving that, you see that something Ma'aser that became tamei, you can redeem it even in Yerushalayim. How do you know? This because it says the pasuk in Devarim. It says that if it's going to be very far from you to take your Ma'aser Sheni up to Yerushalayim, because you can't carry it. Okay, then you can redeem it. But the word seis, says the Gemara, it actually means not only carrying. It means that you can redeem it if you can't eat it. Because it says in the pasuk in Bereshit with Yosef and the brothers, that basically he went and they had a meal together. But so we see that means if you can't eat it, why can't you eat it? Because it became tamei. So you see that you can redeem it if it became tamei. So what do you tell me that it became tamei? Who cares? So you can't eat it, but you can still redeem it. So it's still considered double shesh lematirin. So it says the Gemara, no elabel kuach. Okay, no, we're talking about where this meiser is actually bought. The kesef Ma'aser Sheni, with the Ma'aser Sheni funds. And this food itself was not Ma'aser. It was the needs of a meal that he bought in Yerushalayim with the Ma'aser funds. That cannot be redeemed. Because that's not the Ma'aser Sheni itself. Says he might, why? Because the Ma'aser not lifrike. Even if it was bought with the Ma'aser Sheni funds, it could also be redeemed. Because now we're learning the Ma'aser Sheni that says, if the food that was bought with the Ma'aser Sheni funds, if that became tamei, which it has the sanctity of Ma'aser Sheni, yifte can be redeemed. Says the Gemara, but we're going to Rabbi Yehuda Dami cover. It's like Rabbi Yehuda, who he says over there that since this is not the primary Ma'aser Sheni itself, it's something that was bought with Ma'aser Sheni funds. It's not strong enough for the halacha pidyon to apply with it, and then we cannot redeem it. And he says no, it has to be buried. So it's a dvar is has to be buried. So therefore, the halacha bittul will apply to it. Says the Gemara, you Rabbi Yehuda, if it's Rabbi Yehuda, then I have a question, a more critical question. Then why are you talking about anything about that it having left Yerushalayim? Who cares? Even if it didn't go out, if you tell me it became tamei, so why does it have to leave Yerushalayim? It became tamei. It was bought in Ma'aser Sheni funds. It has no relevancy. You have to bury it. So Allah says, no, the oilam betar. Okay, let's a different case. We're talking about where this Ma'aser Sheni, whether it's the original Ma'aser Sheni, whether it was bought Ma'aser Sheni funds, is tahar. So you said, so who cares that you went out of Yerushalayim? Bring it back in. Who cares? Says the Gemara, no, my yatsa, what does the Brisa mean when it said that it left? It means the nafal mechitzos. It means that the walls of Yerushalayim fell down. Now, Ma'aser cannot be eaten there anymore until you put back up walls, because the pasuk says L'fnei Hashem techlenu, which it means it has to be in front of Hashem, it has to be enclosed in walls. And you can't redeem it either, because Allah is, once koltu mechitzos, once the walls already took possession of it, it doesn't allow it to be redeemed anymore once it had entered inside of it. So now there's nothing to do about it. That's what it's saying the case. Of course, if there was walls, you'd bring it right back in. No, the walls fell down of Yerushalayim. So therefore now it's a dvar isser. So that's what we're saying the halacha of bittul applies. Says Gemara, but wait a second. Rabbi says in Masechet Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, mechitza. This that it says in the Torah, the partitions, the walls, that was only mentioned le'achol, to eat inside of it, which that is deraisa. That's a biblical halacha. Lefnei Hashem techleno, you have to eat it in front of Hashem, which means within the walls of Yerushalayim. But mechitza is regarding the partitions that the Mishnah mentions, likloit, that it captures it, that it doesn't allow it to be redeemed anymore if it leaves. That's only drabbanan, that's rabbinic halacha. So as Rashi explains, this next part of the Gemara is not Rava saying, it's the Gemara who's the questioner that's saying, for the fact that Rava says that the fact that once it gets captured in the wall space of Yerushalayim, that's rabbinic halacha, that now you cannot redeem it anymore. But now that the walls fell down, that gezerah shouldn't apply. Why? Because if he goes Rabban, when the Rabban make a gezerah is kiyas no lemechitzas, if the walls are there. And this guy took his meiser out of the walls. Okay, you can't redeem it anymore. But kiles no lemechitzas, when the walls are not here anymore, like Gazra Rabban and Rabban weren't geyser, so therefore again you should be able to redeem it. So why is it batal? There has matirin. Says, no, not true. Like plug Rabbanan. We know a well-known Talmudic dictum. The Rabbanan did not differentiate between if you took it out of the walls or the walls collapsed. Once it took the walls, it was in the airspace of the walls of Yerushalayim. They were geyser. Bein islam mechitzas, bein less mechitzas. Where the walls are around, where the walls are not around, the halach is that's it. You can't redeem it anymore. You can't redeem it. So what am I supposed to do? It's mixing with a tarayvis. The halacha bittul is going to apply. That was the second case that the Brisa said. Or another approach, as the Gemara Rabbi Yehuda Rab Sheshes, he says this that you were asking on Chizkiah from the Reisha that said in that Brisa, which Maisa were we talking about? There was two cases. One case was the first case that we asked on Chizkiah. We said, oh, if it doesn't have a Shavah Pruta, and you see that it needs bittul, we had asked on Chizkiah, this was how the daf started, that, wait a second, why didn't you do like Chizkiah? Why did you say that you'd be mevatel on mois rishainas? Why is there halacha bittul apply? It should be considered davishas matirin. The Gemara is going back on that question, not anymore on the second case that we were discussing now. Back on the first question, we would ask on Chizkiah, says Gemara, no, that's not difficult. Because actually, Chadikatani, it's actually going to answer both questions, because actually it's not two cases. The two cases are actually one case. Meiser Sheni she'ein b'shava pruta. If you have Meiser Sheni that's not with a pruta, shenichnas l'Yerushalayim v'yatza, that when Yerushalayim came out, that the wall space of Yerushalayim already took a possession of it that prevents it from being deconsecrated anymore on the first monies. That's the case. So it actually answers both questions. We had asked, well, who cares about the fact that it went in, went out, you can bring it right back in. That was the question we asked in the second case. And the first case we had asked on Chizkiah. So I'll answer both questions with one answer. It's one case. So it's not difficult on Chizkiah, the first case, because you can't be Mechal anymore, because you took it out. Once it went in, you can't anymore deconsecrate. And it's also not difficult about why don't you just bring it back in, because it's less than a pruta. Says the Gemara, wait a second, not so simple. Amai. But what's the problem? Well, why don't you bring it back in and eat in Yerushalayim with the tarayv? Who cares that you're right? You can't be poided anymore, so you can't do Chizkiah's idea of chil because it was inside. Now that you took it outside, you can't be poided anymore. But bring it back in and eat it inside. Says the Gemara. Okay, now we're going to start over the conversation like we had in the first version. No, do not for mechitzas. When we said that it was yatsa that went out, doesn't mean even went out of Yerushalayim. It just means the walls of Yerushalayim collapsed. Says the Gemara. Okay, but v'nifrake. Why don't you redeem it then? Because Rabbi said, the halacha that the partitions of regarding eating in Yerushalayim, that's the rest. That's a biblical halacha. Mechitza look like the halacha of the partitions that it takes possession of that you can't redeem anymore. That's Rabban's rabbinic. So Mechi goes Rabban. When Rabban make a gzeres, kiyas mechitza are still around. Mechitza are here, so we're not going to redeem. But kiles mechitza is not here anymore. Because Rabban weren't geysers. Says, no, it's not true. Plug Rabban do not differentiate, and therefore would apply even if the mechitza is not here anymore and you cannot redeem it, and therefore that's why you can't redeem it. That's why we're saying that the halacha bittul is going to apply. But it says, wait a second. If that's the case, like the way Rav Sheshes is answering, that it's one case, these two cases. So my area, why are you saying ein b'shava pruta? Why are you saying that if it doesn't have a shava pruta, that nafl mechitza is afila yeshba, even if it has the value of pruta, nami, you also cannot eat it, and you cannot deconsecrate it because again, the walls are not here anymore. So you can't eat it because it has to eat in the walls. You can't be mechalet either because it was already once in the airspace. So why are you saying, which ma'aser did we say it, if it doesn't have a shava pruta and it was taken in and taken out, you don't have to be. It can even be worth a pruta. There's nothing to do with it anymore. Can't eat because no walls are slime. Can't mechal because it already was in the airspace. Says the Gemara, you're right. We're saying we didn't have to say. We're saying a bigger chiddush. I don't have to tell you that if it has a Shabbat Pruta, which is something that is a element that could be redeemed on its own merit. With the Kolton Mechitza is if it gets captured in the wall space of Yerushalayim. So then, of course, the rabbinic halacha of Klitas Mechitza is going to take effect, and you can't redeem it anymore. Chiddush was saying is, "Aval aim boy," but if it doesn't have a worth of a pruta ema, I would have thought to say in such a case that the Rabbanan weren't geyser that loy koltule mechitzas. I would say maybe the wall space did not capture it for preventing it to be redeemed, because that's something that's not common to deconsecrate something on the earlier monies that you had done, like Chizkiah had said, because really this is less than a pruta. This actually cannot be redeemed on its own merit. Kamashon has a chiddush even in such a case. But you're right, it's lav davka pachas mishavet pruta. Now, continue on this theme that we had mentioned. We said we'll say the source for it of this whole pachas mishavet pruta, which is really from Chizkiah's teaching in the previous daf. The Gemara brings the source for this. Terminal in the brisa. Im gol yigol ishmi ma'isroi. The pasuk says if a person is going to redeem his meiser, so then he has this whole halacha of adding on a fifth, and then he takes the money up to Yerushalayim. Now, the word mi meiser, from his meiser, is an exclusionary terminology. From means not all. B'loi kol meiser, not all is meiser. What are we excluding? What can you not redeem? That includes the second type that does not have the value of a pruta, where it's not included in geula. The pasuk is teaching you that, it's not going to take effect on the pruta. It's too insignificant. And that's really where this whole conversation started of Chizkiah, that, okay, what do you do? So he said, okay, no problem. Hu v'chamsha, you'll say on the Moisir Shainis, which are all connected from the previous stuff that we had this conversation. But the Gemara has a machlokes. Once we brought in this teaching, the Gemara has a machlokes how to qualify. Idma, we learned, Rav Amar, he says, ein boy. What we learned was if the Meiser itself does not have a value of a pruta, but if the Meiser itself has a value of pruta, then it's something that could be redeemed, and its pidyon will take effect. Rav Asami says, no, ein b'chomshay. We learned that if the chaimish does not have a value of a pruta, then it's something that cannot have redemption until the item is actually worth 4 prutas, so that now it will be appropriate to take effect the additional fifth that says in the pasuk that the fifth will be worth a pruta, and then you could do pidyon. So that's the machlokes. Does the meiser item have to be a pruta, or does the fifth even have to be able to be a pruta? Now, so too we have the same machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan, he says ein boy. Says we said if it does not have a value of pruta. He says ein b'chomshay if the chaimish does not have a value of pruta. That's the machlokes. So the Gemara says the Gemara asks on Rabbi Yochanan and Rabami in the following brisa. The brisa says meiser sheini sheimish of a pruta. We have meiser sheini that does not have a value of pruta. So the brisa says da yeshayim. It's enough that the guy should say this is chizkis halacha, and the brisa teaches it. It's enough to say hu v'chumshay mechol meiser sheinis. The meiser and its fifth. Okay, what are you going to do? You can't be machaled because less than the Shabbat Pruta. It'll be machal on the previous monies that you already deconsecrated, like we said, because you leave over a margin. Says the Gemara, we understand according to Rish Lakish, that says that the halacha that you cannot be paid is if even the fifth does not have a Shabbat Pruta. Okay, so now we can understand the words of the Brisa. That's why it's like Chizkiah's halacha that, okay, it's enough to say a bigger chiddush, meaning we don't say, okay, you should wait until you bring it up to Yerushalayim, or you should wait until you combine it with some other coin, for the fact that Lamaisa, it is a chashaba, the actual primary principle is worth more than the Shabbat Pruta. So that's the chiddush. They're saying, no, it's enough. Because the avagav dibidide is paid, and that's the chiddush. Even though the ma'aser does have a value of pruta, but even the mechum shei leka, but since the fifth doesn't have a value of pruta, the chiddush is okay. It's not significant, and you know what? It's enough to say that you could say on whatever previous money that was deconsecrated. So shaper, it makes sense the word dayai to explain this halach of Chizkiah. But almandam aim boy. But according to one that says that the ma'aser itself does not have a value of pruta, my dayai. What's the chiddush that you have to say? Oh, it's sufficient. What does that mean? When it's sufficient, there's no other option. It's not worth it. It's not even worth the pruta. You should just say that the guy should say hu v'chamshay like the ikar halach of Chizkiah. So it's more kasha that definitely is a difficult, not a tiyufta, but it's a difficulty. The word daya would seem to indicate like Rish Lakish that we're talking about that the chaimish has to have a pruta and not like Rabbi Yochanan who says the item itself. Thank you for any time.